Hey, welcome to episode 117 of the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. In this three-part series, we sit down with Matt Szluka. Matt's currently employed as a state trooper and fixed-wing aircraft pilot with the Illinois State Police in the Chicagoland area. Matt was born and raised in the Chicago area and has lived in the city his entire life. Prior to joining the Illinois State Police Air Operations Bureau as a pilot, Matt was assigned as a canine handler to the Illinois State Police Statewide Anti-Violence Enforcement Team and the District 15 Criminal Patrol Team. Outside of his law enforcement duties, Matt works part-time as an instructor at a local college, teaching aviation classes to aspiring pilots. Matt has 12 years of law enforcement experience at 3 different police departments in Chicago. Outside of being a pilot and canine handler, Matt has experience as a member of the Illinois State Police Chicago Region Crowd Control Team, as a canine instructor, a canine crowd control instructor, a field training officer, and evidence technician. Before Matt entered law enforcement, he was an airline captain at a large regional airline that serves cities across North America and the Bahamas. During his time in the airlines, Matt was a human factors facilitator and crew resource management instructor. Matt received a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Illinois in Aviation Human Factors, which spurred his passion for human interaction with advanced technologies, particularly as it relates to aviation. Matt now focuses his efforts on supporting his fellow brothers and sisters on the ground, utilizing aircraft and other technologies for criminal enforcement, especially in the city of Chicago, a place he has proudly called home for 42 years. In part 2 of this 3-part series, Matt talks about his time working as an interdiction trooper with his canine partner and how that helped to shape the tactics he's employing in aviation. Matt talks about how LPR technology helped him and the regional troopers recover a kidnapped 15-year-old girl. He talks at length about some of the technology his agency is utilizing, which includes license plate reading technology, to make their aviation program a proactive airborne interdiction type unit. We also talk about the importance of stat keeping in your aviation programs. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Metro Aviation, Shotover, and CNC Technologies for making this conversation possible. Cheers.
Welcome to the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z Podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Join your host, John Gray, Jeff Ratkovich, and Jack Shanley.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like you're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, threw the shotgun, threw something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
4 on the stop. You're in custody.
Good advising code 4 on the stop.
Jack, looking at your career, LA, the city of LA seems to be the forefront of politics and media relations and all the things that surround law enforcement, at least on the West Coast. How have you seen things change over the course of your career to where they are now? And where do you kind of see it going from here?
What I have to tag along with Matt. It was very similar to what he just described. We never, in the 80s, when it was insanity in South Central, for instance, I mean, homicide rates through the roof, crack cocaine through the roof. Was it too aggressive? Maybe, but it was appreciated by the people, the good people that lived there, because it was not safe. They wanted us to go out there and do that. So the perception was the whole thing that we always dealt with. It wasn't the reality. The reality was that I always considered myself professional and compassionate, even at my most aggressive times. That's why I liked your talk there, Matt, because I thought of myself and went, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. But the perception was that we're a bunch of stormtroopers, and we're a bunch of paramilitary. I mean, you used that word too, Matt. And that's how we were looked at by the media. And the media ran the show. And that's why we went through our hard times, on top of which, shot ourselves in the foot regularly with stupidity and some bad officers. But we had nearly 10,000. And of course, you're going to have a handful that are going to really bring the group down. It's a battle. And now they've swung way too far the other way, where the aggressive policing is not encouraged like it was. I remember in the 80s and 90s, at the end of the month, there would be stats on a board, and you would see everybody on every watch, how many field interview cards they did, how many arrests, how many felonies, how many misdemeanors, how many were observations, how many radio calls, how many tickets, all that stuff. You would know that. They would never dream of putting that up today, because we're encouraging you to be assertive. Well, assertive policing works. And I know we're going to talk more about this, Matt, with what you're doing right now. And I love looking at your posts, and because it encourages me and it gives me hope that there's still departments out there that are going out there and enforcing the law, and they're doing it right. They're not being a bunch of thugs. They're going out there and they're enforcing the law, and they're doing their job, working with different agencies and getting it done. And I think that's encouraging. You should be very happy that you're with the department you're with that's willing to do that, because not everybody's doing it.
Jack, like you said, the neighborhoods, the people in those neighborhoods, I've worked in the worst neighborhoods of Chicago regularly on a nightly basis. And the people in those neighborhoods, primarily minority communities, love having us there. Exactly. I've had people, we had a post-incident where there was a crash and some people had fled. I'm out with my dog, and this woman, as daytime, just literally stops, pulled over, and she rolls her window down. And she goes, "The good guys are here. We love you. Love seeing you here," and drives away. And it's just like, of course they love it. And, we'll be on incidents and we'll just have people come out and talk to us, and they enjoy talking to us, and we just talk to them like we would anybody, right? Just fantastic interactions with people in these communities that love having us there, and they don't want this crime there. They want their grandchildren or children to go down to the park and play. They don't want to have to worry about them getting shot, or they don't want to have to go to the gas station worry about getting carjacked. They enjoy having us there because I think that they know that we do it the right way and we're respectful to them. So,
and unfortunately, channel 2, 4, 7, 9, 11, and 13 don't report that sort of thing. They taint it, and that makes everybody think that, wow, these police are not good. They're not your friends. Yeah. When in fact, you see on a nightly basis the response from the actual citizens that you're supporting in some of the worst neighborhoods, where I worked there too, Matt, and I saw the same thing. I got thanked, just like all my fellow officers. We got thanked a lot by the community. And I'll add one last thing about that. When it came time for referendums for increased policing, or where it's going to cost more on taxes, where did it pass overwhelmingly? In the worst communities in LA. Where did it not pass? In the most affluent communities in LA. We don't need that. But the places that really needed policing, they actually supported the police in a big way, and it just never got portrayed that way. Luckily, we had people like everybody sitting here and a lot of our friends that didn't care about the perception. We just continue to march and do our job.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the affluent communities and even the academic communities don't have a whole lot of interaction with law enforcement because they're not living in those communities that you're talking about. Their perception of what we're doing is often founded in what's being reported in the media. And we've talked about how that's all biased. The small percentage of officers that make bad decisions and make us look bad dominate the headlines. So if you're someone that consumes that information and doesn't have that interaction with law enforcement on a daily basis, that's going to be the foundation of what you believe. That's kind of why I like what we're doing with the podcast and this media forum, is we can get these stories out from guys like Matt and Jack and all the folks that have been on podcasts to talk about the positive impacts that we've made in our community and the safety that we provided for the folks on the ground and the other officers on the ground. So it's kind of a way to fight back against, the mainstream version of what law enforcement is, so it's kind of like a punch to their stomach to be like, no, that's not what we are. And that's not what we do. This is real stuff, what we're talking about. So that's cool. Getting back to your career, Matt, prior to going to aviation, what assignments did you hold and what did you do there?
So like I said, I worked at 2 other agencies just on patrol briefly before coming to the state. Coming out of the gate of state, I knew that I wanted to do interstate interdiction was a big reason why I came to the state police. So while I was on patrol, I worked a lot of times on Interstate 80, kind of passes through our area south of Chicago, trying to get into the drug interdiction game. And because I was doing that so hard, when a canine slot opened and a dog was available and being reassigned from somebody leaving canine, my captain said that I could be the next canine handler. So about a year and a half into being a trooper, I got my first dog, Jordan, who is fantastic. She's sleeping over there. She's still with me at 12 and a half years old. So that's kind of where my career took off, because being in canine, I got so many opportunities to assist DEA, assist ATF, Homeland Security agencies, terrorism task forces, all these things, and got exposure to all these different opportunities, doing interdiction stuff, getting loads of drugs or money seizures on the highway. It was just really fun, awesome work doing that stuff on the highway. Like you said, the cat and mouse game of interdiction, it's ever changing. To discover these compartments and traps, we found numerous, concealed compartments and different mechanical traps and things like that. That stuff was really awesome to me. But at the same time, I kind of was always a street cop and loved working in the city. So when the radio would go off that there was an armed robbery or something, I just would come off the highway and go right after it.
Yeah.
I kind of have that reputation about it. So within canine, I was originally in our district, which is on the toll roads. I was on the tollway criminal interdiction team. They called District 15 at the time. And then from there, I went to our statewide anti-violence enforcement team, which was created to combat a lot of the violence and the shootings and things like that, the carjackings that are occurring in the major metros. So we worked in Chicago, which is great because I love Chicago. Got to work in Chicago. People would joke that even though I wasn't assigned to Chicago, I always ended up in Chicago a lot, which was true. So finally working there. And like I said, that was a lot of pursuits and things like that. But being on that team, they needed air support, and they saw how valuable it was to the mission. And being that I have an aviation background, they brought me on part-time to become an observer, utilizing all that experience I had on the ground to hopefully help bridge the gap between the aircraft and the ground units on the team that I was actually working for. So I was doing the TFO observer position for the same guys that I would work with. So on Tuesday, I would be on the street because it was a little rainy and we couldn't fly. And then on Wednesday, I'd be in the plane with the same, assistant, the same guys. And then finally, they got approval to add additional pilot positions. And because I had all my certificates and ratings and had done a decent enough job in there that they liked me enough, they brought me over full time to the aviation unit. I love this aviation gig. So
go back to the interdiction conversation real quick. I remember taking a class prior to going to aviation. It was an interdiction course, and I forgot who taught it, but it was an agency from back east, and they had probably like a 30-minute video, a compilation of all these seizures that they had been a part of, and a video of all the different compartments and stuff that they'd found. And it was really inspiring. The early part of my career, I worked for San Diego PD, and I was assigned to Southern Division. So a lot of times I get to go to the border, the San Ysidro, the border crossing there is one of the busiest border crossings in the U.S. In Customs, we had a good relationship with them. They'd allow us to go into their secondary and watch them search. So we saw all kinds of weird. I remember a brand new Yukon came in. It looked like a factory Yukon to me, but obviously those guys know what they're looking at, and so do you. They pulled it into secondary, and they dismantled the dash, and there was a lady that was concealed, trying to get across the border. I was like, holy cow. The fact that she would put herself in a position like that to get across the border was insane. But, you think of all the other, contraband that's being shipped across the borders in these compartments. I'll ask a question to both of you, since you both ran dogs and had experience with this. What was the most unique compartment that you ever found, and how did you find it?
Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned air medical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 140-plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completions Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs, including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
Matt, we'll start with you.
There was one that it was actually not my stop, but I did the canine sniff on it with a good friend of mine who was also a canine handler. And we worked a lot together. We would kind of tag team in the same section of interstate because we were on the team together. And he stopped a car or a pickup truck. It was a rental pickup truck that had a trailer that had like a Chevy Nova or something on the back of it. It was like a 1970 something car. He started seeing signs of deception in the driver, and things didn't make sense in terms of the mileage on the truck and whatnot, and why he was transporting this car. So he asked me to run my dog Jordan on the trailer and the truck, and she hit on the trailer. And then we started seeing some of the signs that the trailer had been modified. So we actually brought it to a tow yard, removed the vehicle from it, and the entire trailer lifted up hydraulically, and it was loaded with cash. It had like $1.3 million cash in it that was inside this modified trailer. And how many trips that guy has done back and forth. Yeah. But it was just pretty cool. Like just seeing the little nuances about how the trailer floor was a little wider than it should be. And normally the boards go here and there's a little welded piece here. And it just slowly unraveled until we lifted up this thing and it was just loaded with bundles of money. So,
gosh,
that's incredible. Yeah. That's a great find.
Yeah.
Jack, I know your dog was an apprehension dog, but did you have a lot of experience dealing with that type of thing when you were on the street?
Not as much as the dope dogs and bob dogs, and we had 3 separate units for that. Was your dog dual purpose, Matt, or was it straight dope?
Dual purpose. So
dual purpose.
We did a lot of narcotic stuff here, but we also do a lot of tracking and apprehension stuff. So
see, I was at a department big enough where they kept it separate, so it was all man work. So we didn't deal with those tiny, unique compartments as much. we would get surprised regularly with finds of humans hiding in places that you just go, no, they can't fit there. And there they are, tight spaces. One of my favorites is a cabinet with a padlock on it on the bottom under a sink. And patrol had gone through it and looked at it and said, oh, well, it's too small, can't fit there. And there's a padlock on it. Well, Mom was in the house when he ran in there. And when the dog went in, bam, hits on that cabinet. You pop the lock, the guy's stuffed in there. They had to dismantle the cabinet to get him out. I mean, how he even got in there is amazing. So that kind of thing, even with man work, was rewarding. I mean, Matt can relate to that word in canine. It's very rewarding in that you get to see the dog find things that you probably wouldn't have found.
Yeah.
And you go, I'm really glad I've got that four-legged guy right there with me, because I would not have found that, and same thing with dope, even more so.
Yeah.
I mean, the tighter compartments and very creative places that these guys have figured out how to hide it. That's a good one with the trailer. Wow, that's fantastic.
Did you guys do tracking then too with your apprehension dogs?
Yes and no.
Okay.
We did some tracking training, but most of the dogs we didn't do tracking because it was almost 100% urban environment. It was not practical most of the time. Now that has changed over the years. There are dogs now that track in an urban environment very successfully.
Yeah.
Through different training techniques that have gone over the decades. We're talking 90s when I was doing it. So it was all air sending. We just go yard to yard to yard to yard in a systematic way until the dog gets into the scent cone and finds them. But we did some tracking training just in case you did get like a park. Griffith Park is the largest public park in the United States, I believe. It's huge. And we got bad guys that ran in Griffith Park. And if you had one of our dogs what was pretty good tracker, we'd use that dog.
Yeah.
But most of them did very little tracking training.
So we talk about the dope and interdiction, but the tracking to me is like one of the best disciplines in canine. I love it because there's something great about a dog that can find a person after they've fled, through yards and through creeks. I had a mile-long track with my second dog. She was a much better tracking dog than apprehension or dope. And we had a mile-long track on a short lead. I only had a 6-foot lead due to the situation of what happened with the call. It was originally an apprehension scenario and then turned into a track. But I had these SWAT guys with me, and we got about 3/4 of the way through the track, and they're like, this dog's just taking us on a walk. This is getting tiring. And a neighbor guy was like, hey, are you guys looking for anybody? And we're like, yeah, these 2 females. And they're like, yeah, they went that way. They just walked through my yard. And these guys are like, this dog's dead on it. Let's go.
Yeah.
So it's cool because that's one of the best disciplines, in my opinion, in the canine is doing that, because a good tracking dog is really valuable, especially with the stuff we're talking about with the aviation stuff. So,
yeah.
But dogs are awesome animals in general. They're funny too. Each dog has its own personality, of course. They do some weird stuff that kind of leads into the next question. I remember, especially in aviation, we're helping the canine folks out with their searches. Whenever you see a dog hop out, and this probably happens, you guys probably see all the time, the dog hops out and you see on the infrared, he takes a dump right after he gets out of the car. You're like, oh, he's set. He's ready to go. So it was kind of a good luck charm. What did you see? What was the funniest thing you saw with your canine in your time? And Matt, we'll start with you.
These dogs, both of them, have just been, it's the most rewarding job, or one of the most rewarding jobs in law enforcement, but it's an absolute headache. These dogs, just the amount of things that they do and things like that. I've had them poop in houses doing searches, like we're doing a search warrant with DEA and the family's sitting on the couch and I'm doing a dog sniff and then all of a sudden she squats. She's probably done that like 5 times. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. And I got to clean it up and things like that. But one of the funniest ones that I can think of off the top of my head in terms of weird things, we were on the front lines of the civil unrest in downtown Chicago during the George Floyd riots. And we're on the Wabash Bridge, which is right in front of Trump Tower. And when we show up on scene and we walk out there, Chicago police has the line. They're doing a fantastic job. The horses are out. They're throwing boulders at us, frozen water bottles. Fireworks are getting fired. There's a burned out Chicago squad covered in graffiti. There's graffiti everywhere. It's just like you would picture, right? Adrenaline was peaked. So I come up with my dog and I look down and she's eating all this food that people had dropped like food. So there's like chow mein on the ground and I'm trying to get her away. And then she hates plastic water bottles. So they're throwing these frozen water bottles at us and she's going after every one of them. So here I am on the front lines of a riot and I'm fighting with my dog over food and frozen water bottles. So finally I was like, I'm putting her up and just getting a baton. This is pointless because she's just going to eat and then poop all over my truck and I can't, so.
That's funny.
Yeah, the glamorous job of canine, cleaning up poop.
Yeah.
But I'd like to kind of sidetrack down that conversation for a second, because that was a really interesting moment in our country's history. I think just about every major city had some sort of a demonstration or riot happening across the country and then even throughout the world. Outside of that experience, what was your experience like during that period?
It was interesting because I was on our crowd control team. So I was on it before I was canine, but as canine, you're automatically kind of assigned to it in case the dogs are needed to be utilized. They don't get utilized as much, and we practice all this stuff, and we never thought we would deploy. But in one of the towns, the west suburbs of Aurora, we actually had a dog deployment. We said dogs to the front, and where they run the dogs out, and we kind of run them back and forth to kind of push the line back to get them off the front line. So that was really interesting. But the downtown Chicago stuff was it was surreal. We were driving around down there, like I said, the Wabash Bridge. That was a long day. I think it was like an 18-hour day. When I finally got home, you saw like every version of it, right? So we were talking about the pendulum swinging. Over here, we have all this riot, and you're face-to-face with people over here. And then over here, we have some pictures of one of our troopers hugging somebody out in the middle of the riot, giving them a hug. I was on Michigan Avenue by the Wrigley building, which is just north of the river. And we were trying to push back a group. And one of the women there was like partially disabled and she was up on this planter. And we're like, ma'am, you got to get back. So I actually grabbed her and I helped her down off the planter. And we're all standing there in full riot gear with sticks. And I'm literally helping this lady and escorting her back instead of pushing her back. I'm like escorting her back off the line. And then they're throwing tear gas and stuff like that. So it was just like this wide variety of like experiences with life in little moments. Like on a grandiose scheme, it looks like this huge battle between protesters and police, but then you see these little instances of like humanity in there between us where it was just people expressing themselves and us kind of trying to keep order. So
yeah,
that was that was a very interesting time.
It was wild, out here, the widespread rioting and looting taking place. The city that I have to drive through to get home, it's the city of San Bernardino, and it's not a nice city on a good day. So, you had the riots and everything that's happening there during that time. I remember one of the days listening to the radio as I'm getting ready to drive home, listening to the TAC frequency where they're talking about a lot of the gas stations and shops that line the street that I take to get home, getting burnt out, looted. And there's, armed robberies taking place right in front and people openly brandishing weapons. I'm like, oh, great. Now I got to drive through this area to get home. Might as well just stay at work. But luckily by the time I'd driven through, it was all but quiet. It was weird. It was like tumbleweeds blowing through. I'm like, what happened to, all this chaos? Jack, did you have any experience with that in LA when you were working either in the street or in aviation?
Thank you to our sponsor, Shotover. Shotover Systems is the leading developer and manufacturer of high-performance gyro-stabilized cameras with advanced real-time AR mapping and mission management, all backed by unparalleled custom training and support. Now offering the M2 multi-sensor system, sole 6-axis EO/IR platform with 4K Ultra HD color and infrared technology. Ideal for law enforcement and defense. Offered with real-time AR overlays to quickly identify streets, weather, and traffic. Automated license plate recognition, 24 megapixel digital photographs, and automated steering and tracking.
With the rioting stuff, the 92 riots, I was in Metro at the time. So we were the crowd control people, similar to what Matt was talking about. And that was a wild week of a lot of stuff going on. And we were really handcuffed. They didn't let us do very much because they were scared. The department brass were scared of what it would look like if we really went in and took care of things. And we were told, directly ordered not to intercede a lot. And I often tell people it was the most embarrassing week of my career because we could have done so much more. I mean, Florence and Normandy could have been prevented. And officers weren't allowed to prevent it because they were worried about the image of live TV and all that. I've often told people that if the LAPD had been allowed to go into Florence and Normandy and take care of that one intersection that was getting all the focus of the live media, and it was taken care of in a very aggressive fashion, I don't think the riots are widespread. I truly believe that, because what the people sitting at home did see was, hey, the police are not doing anything. And the police, every now and then you see a police car come through that intersection, just, haul ass out of there. And what does that tell the average person at home? Oh, they're not going to do anything. I need a new TV.
Yeah.
And out they go. And next thing you know, it really grew. That was a very strange week. We did a lot of sitting around, believe it or not, at a command post. The officers that were on vacation and on days off, they came in and they all got grouped up, the Metro guys, and they ended up getting into some wild stuff. I mean, major shootouts. But the officers that were on duty at the time, I was one of them, we were very restrained, and it was very troubling. And like I said, I don't look at that week very fondly at all. Yeah. It was embarrassing that I know we could have saved lives and we could have done a lot of good things, and we weren't allowed to.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Right.
It's history now.
I was gonna say the interesting thing too is that was during COVID for us.
Oh, yeah.
We all marched in with masks on and goggles and everything else, and then we're sweating. And the next thing you know, we're just ripping them off. And for 10 days, we hit the pause button on COVID. It was like, there's no COVID right now. We're dealing with this. So it was interesting. So sorry to interrupt you, John, but
no, you're
it
good.
was just interesting how both coincided. Yeah.
Getting back to the original question that I'd asked, and Jack, this will be for you now. In your time running canines, what was the funniest thing that happened to you?
Oh, there's so many things. Just like Matt said, I mean, a lot of poop stories, huh, Matt? But aside from another poop story, there was some funny stuff, some stuff that scared me. One thing I've told this story many times is to show you how unpredictable dogs are in general. I was at a golf tournament, the police celebrity golf tournament. And I'm just there as a just static display kind of thing, with the dog. And three young ladies come up to me and say, "Oh, your dog is beautiful. Can we pet your dog?" "Oh, of course," And my dog was really sociable. I mean, he could go. I took him to Special Olympics where kids are pulling on his tongue and his ears. And 10 minutes later, I could go to a call and he could wipe somebody out. He was a great dog and very friendly, very sociable. So he's eating this up. I mean, he loves it. These three young ladies are paying attention to him. And all of a sudden, I'm talking to one over here and my dog lunges toward the girl to the left. I mean, lunges. And I go, oh, I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going to turn and he's going to be attached to her somehow. And no, he just took a piece of pizza out of her hand. I mean, just pulled and he chopped it down. And she's just standing there with an empty plate and her eyes are this big. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And she's like, "It's okay. I didn't eat that pizza anyway." I'll never forget it. That's exactly what she said. But it scared me so much. Now I can laugh about it now because it is funny. Right. But I wasn't laughing when it happened. It scared me. Gundo went after a firefighter one night too. I don't see a big deal in that. But a firefighter was walking by me in full turnouts, and he did the same thing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He lunged at him, and I went, "What is this dog doing?"
Yeah.
When in fact, what he's doing is he's going for the bite suit because it looked just like a bite suit, and it didn't register right away though. I thought, oh my God, my dog, what's he doing? He's going after a firefighter. Not a big deal, but the turnouts look like a bite suit. So it was kind of funny. Those are some funny things that came up.
I never actually considered the fact that it does look like a bite suit. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
exactly like a bite suit.
Yeah.
Wow. Matt, going back to you in your career, can you talk about, you talked about being selected to aviation, you were a part-time TFO, and then you got selected to be a pilot. Can you talk about, how you solidified your spot there full-time, and then what your unit looks like as far as the aircraft you fly, what mission equipment you're using, and what your mission profiles are?
We have 4 aircraft and 11 pilots. We all fly right now Cessna 182 aircraft. The airplanes are getting pretty old. The equipment's pretty old. We have some pretty old camera systems with the FLIR 230 HD camera, which we use up here in Chicago. A couple of the aircraft are equipped with old FLIR 8500 cameras. Those are downstate. I've used those a couple times, but I haven't used it quite as much as the FLIR 230. But we just ordered 3 brand new Cessna 206 aircraft, which are currently being built and equipped right now. And
Nice.
they're going to be equipped with the Westcam MX-10. We're going to have a much larger display systems with a joint back seat into front seat system. So if we're doing like a training mission where we're flying in the front seat, doing like a quarterly check ride and a pursuit pops off, we can just pull the controller up there and have a camera or a monitor up there for the camera in the front seat to just jump right into the mission from training. Or if we want to work in the back and have a larger display system, we can do that in the back. So that's pretty exciting to be getting those sometime next year. And we're all really looking forward to that. So like I said, we only have Cessna 182, so we only do fixed wing aircraft right now, just due to the way that the mission has kind of gone, and it's worked for us. We haven't done a lot of patrol until the last 2 to 3 years. That's kind of new, not only for the Illinois State Police, but just in general for Illinois. It just wasn't a big thing. So Chicago Police deploying their helicopters in a patrol capacity, that's new for them too. So they have old equipment. We have old equipment because it was just not as big as it is in some of the other states like California, Florida, Texas, things like that, right? We used the airplanes historically a lot for more surveillance missions and manhunts and things like that. We do some traffic enforcement type activities, but we still do a lot of surveillance activities. And we get a lot of call outs for missing persons, manhunts, pursuits, and everything like that. And we can manage to use the fixed wing just fine for most of that stuff. There are times, particularly in the major metros, where it probably would make more sense, depending on the weather and the conditions of the airspace, the Class B airspace, that a helicopter might be a little bit better. But we work around it right now with the fixed-wing aircraft. So in terms of selection for the pilots, like you said, I had an airline transport certificate, commercial instrument, all that stuff, CFI, CFII, MEI. So I had a lot of experience in like over 5,000 hours of flight time. I hadn't flown in 12 years, but I had a lot of time, right? So I had to kind of get back in the saddle with it in terms of selection, but it didn't take long to get back into it. But historically, the aviation unit here likes to hire or bring over pilots that at least have like a private pilot certificate or have done enough training in there to know that they have the aptitude for it. Because it's really tough to bring somebody over and then find out that they don't have the aptitude for it, because it's kind of like a little bit of wasted time that you need somebody, right? So they like to interview and select people that do have that aptitude for it. I know probably talk about some TFO stuff too, but we don't have TFOs per se. We do pilots who are also TFOs. So when we do our selection, you're being selected for the aptitude to do both positions, right? You have to show aptitude at being a good TFO and have the skills to fly the airplane, which, coming from my background in crew resource management and talking about that earlier, that's tremendous in my opinion, because now if you have a pilot who's the TFO and doing the operating the camera and managing the pursuit, I can communicate what I need the pilot to do to put the airplane in a better position for me using pilot terminology, because I'm a pilot, right? The same thing is when I'm flying pilot, I know what's going on with the camera. I know the gimbal location. I know the gimbal angles and when it's going to go into gimbal lock. So I know when I might have to do a tighter turn or do a little slip, put the aircraft in a slip and put it in a better position to get the camera so the TFO doesn't have any kind of interruption in following that vehicle. So it works out really well in that regard, doing the joint mission. And we basically just show up that day and, hey, who's flying today? You want to fly or I'll fly? A couple of us like working the camera a lot. I personally I work the camera a lot, so I don't fly as much and get as many hours. That doesn't make a difference to me because I enjoy doing the TFO work. So
yeah, that's definitely the meat and potatoes of what we're doing is using that equipment, that technology to find bad guys. We talked about that quite a bit on the podcast and how we're using not just the cameras, systems, and the technology we have on board, but also utilizing the plate readers and some of the other technology that's on the ground. You were involved in a really interesting incident that you talked about in that other podcast where you were able to utilize some LPR technology to track down some suspects. Can you talk about that? I know it's not necessarily aviation related, but it's a really interesting story.
Thank you to our sponsor, CNC Technologies. CNC Technologies, serving law enforcement, government, and military markets with tailored mission solutions, system training, and live 24/7 support with CNC.live platform. Explore more at cnctechnologies.com.
Yeah, so what really got me hooked to kind of how this all coincides with one another, right? So I'm doing highway interdiction stuff, and part of that highway interdiction was utilizing LPR systems basically to confirm people's stories. So to kind of go a little deep into it, but not too deep, just to kind of understand, is when we're developing reasonable suspicion to detain somebody because their story is BS, right? We start seeing their story is not making sense and we're going to unravel it. One of the tools, once we've developed reasonable suspicion to turn to, and we can now extend the stop, is to dive into LPR history and see, where's this car been? Is their story match up where they're traveling? Are there any LPR hits? I had a pretty significant money seizure on Interstate 80 out of a semi. And one of the biggest things that helped me with that was an LPR hit that showed, based on the truck driver's logbook, he lied on his logbook, and I couldn't put him out of service and now detain him and do a canine sniff on the truck, which then in turn got the money. So I was already like, okay, these plate readers are very helpful from an interdiction standpoint. Starting my shift one day, still doing interdiction, there was a missing persons alert downstate in Illinois. A 15-year-old girl had been abducted or kidnapped by a 43-year-old individual from California, and they had a vehicle description and plate. So I put in the LPR system trying to monitor, because I said, I don't know, maybe they'll come to Chicago. It's not a direct route, but I don't know. They could have up here. If they are, I'm going to go look for them, right? So I kept refreshing the LPR system, looking for hits, and I actually got a hit on a squad car, so a mobile LPR, which are attached to the front bumper or the roof of a car. And it was an interdiction guy that I know who also does highway interdiction, but he's a deputy in Nebraska, really outstanding interdiction guy. A lot of really great seizures. And I got his phone number from just kind of like networking through interdiction networks and things like that. So I called him immediately. I said, hey, this car just hit. It's a kidnapping. It hit like 20 minutes ago on your LPR. Do you know any troopers down the line west of you that you can start having look for this car and get this guy? Because he's got like a 15-year-old girl that he kidnapped from Illinois. And he's like, I'm on it. We're going to get it. I'll call the troopers. Our dispatchers started talking, and it turned out that they found the car. It was empty, but it was at a rest area. So the troopers went into the rest area and found that the individual was sexually assaulting the 15-year-old in the bathroom. And it was the third time that he had done it in Nebraska alone. And this was like 12 hours prior that she was kidnapped overnight. So how many times did it happen in Iowa or Illinois? And he had methamphetamine on his person, had a huge criminal history. So from that point forward, I was hooked on this technology. I saw the benefit that it could provide. It's not out there looking for like expired plates, or things like that. We're looking for some serious criminals with this technology. So utilizing that LPR technology now and adding the cameras in the Chicagoland area, we were able to filter out and start finding cars wanted for armed robbery, cars wanted for shootings, cars wanted for homicides, freshly carjacked vehicles. And we can actually put them in the LPR system with a report number before our dispatchers can enter them into the statewide computer system to get a hot plate. So we'll start finding out where these cars are within 30 minutes. Jackie probably saw it when I put some information on there. There was a night the other night, we got in 24 hours, we got 4 freshly carjacked vehicles with weapons and people arrested within an hour of them being carjacked based on this LPR technology. So the way we're using it is getting the LPR hits. We either utilize the LPR hits to get a ground unit on the vehicle who then directs it to us. But what I'm working on doing is trying to proactively take the LPR hits and then find the vehicles so I can give it to the ground units. And I know in the Airbeat magazine that came out, it's funny because you guys had San Jose on a couple episodes ago, and they're doing this stuff. And they had a really cool picture with a tablet there in the cockpit getting LPR hits on flock, and then using the helicopter to hunt. So I call it airborne interdiction is what I'm calling it, is you're using technology to hunt, right? So that I can give those, as a TFOI, can find the car and then give it to the ground units and start directing people into it. So
that is fantastic.
Yeah.
It's really neat to merge this technology together to become, we're up flying around, we're a proactive unit, but a lot of times we're responding to calls because it's hard to see what's happening on the ground. But now we're effectively a proactive air support program because we're utilizing that information and going out and actively looking for these vehicles, which is really cool. In Southern California, a lot of cities have invested in this technology, just like where you have. So you might have a shooting take place in the city you're working, and you can utilize the LPR technology to start tracking that car, and you can find it before it even lands, and you can direct ground units to it. It's really cool, And then my TFO before I retired, he would refresh his phone throughout the flight looking for the flock hits, and we'd get them when they're freshly registered. like you said, dispatch wouldn't even have a chance to put it out and we'd be already looking for it. We found quite a few that way. It's really a neat way to be a proactive air support platform from that standpoint.
And we don't always have the connection because the altitudes we fly at, a lot of times we'll fly at 5,500 feet. We don't have the cellular connection to get it. And I'm refreshing and trying to get some of the information of the hits and things like that. But Chicago Police has like a real-time crime center where they have people that actively monitor the LPRs and will enter them. And they have what they call pod cameras, which are cameras all over the city that are controllable by a joystick. And they'll use a combination of the LPR hits and then the pod cameras. They'll watch these cars drive around. And when they stop at a gas station, they'll zoom in and freeze a picture of the suspects that are in the car. And then they'll describe what they're wearing. Like driver got out, he had a yellow hoodie on with white shoes or whatever. And they'll save that picture and then follow them around the city and direct them to us. And they're providing us the information on the radio saying, this is the next hit. This is the next hit. And I just watched them on the camera. They went westbound on this street. Now they went southbound here. And we'll be able to track and find that car just based on LPR and a camera, actual like surveillance camera technology. So yeah, it's a lethal combination. We're getting a lot of really serious criminals off the street with this stuff. So it gets to the point where we'll get a stolen car with no guns, and we're like, it's just a stolen car.
Yeah.
It's just a steal.
Another stolen.
Yeah.
That's great. It's great to hear the technology being used, and it's really great to hear that it's being done even in the cockpit. That's fantastic. But one other thing about your story, Matt, with the Nebraska thing, I know John talks about networking all the time, at Echo and at all these conventions that all these people go to. But man, that story just solidifies why it is so important to save these numbers. And you go, hey, I know a guy in Nebraska. I mean, think of what that did to save that victim from further terrible things. I mean, just networking created that. Didn't have anything to do with a class you were in or this or that. It had to do with making contact with somebody that you were in the same business and they're in a completely different state, and you have an effect on an apprehension and a very bad guy being taken into custody. That's a great story for that too.
Yeah. And talking on the networking thing, like touching on it, we're doing things here in Illinois where we're using some like messaging applications, not like WhatsApp or anything like that. It's actual like CJIS compliant data retention networking applications that we have like 3,000 cops on it, and they'll post bulletins like car wanted for burglary or motor vehicle here, individual wanted for a robbery here, and it's real time. Like it's real time sharing of actionable intelligence. I like to call it real time actionable intelligence information that we're sharing with each other. But on a more like kind of personal level with it, you get hired by a department. Let's say you have like 40 or 50 officers, right? And there's like 2 or 3 guys that you kind of link up with that are proactive. You kind of hang with those officers and go through your career. Now, like the lines are being blurred. We talked about earlier about supporting other agencies with the aircraft. Even the ground units, the lines are being blurred. So there's an officer in Northwest Indiana who's messaging me and the aircraft about a car that's over here. And then somebody over here in the west suburbs is messaging me about something over there. And I'm sending information back to them. And now all of a sudden you have all these proactive cops that are feeding off of each other, because now it's not only the 3 of you guys in your department of 50, it's the 3 of those guys with the 2 guys at this department, with the 6 at this department, with the 2 at this department. Now all of a sudden there's like 45 officers that are all working night shift talking about things, because these cars go through all these jurisdictions on their way, and they're doing a robbery here and they're doing a robbery here. So the car we got last night wanted for armed robbery. They were doing robberies all along a major thoroughfare through different towns. So they hit one town and zip tied the employees in the back and stole like 90 phones. And then they went to the next town and they zip tied the employees there and stole all the money. And then they got on the LPRs and we got in a pursuit, and then we ended up tracking them to a house. So it's kind of the new way, in my opinion, kind of like a new way that policing is done, right? We talked about the professionalism and the hard work of proactive officers, supplemented by the technology and the aircraft as a vital tool. These guys on the ground will tell you right now. They told me last night in the text thread afterwards, it's almost impossible for them to do their jobs proactively without aircraft overhead now, because the way these guys drive and the pursuit policies and things like that. The one yesterday, I watched a pedestrian literally jump out of the way of the fleeing vehicle because he drove on the sidewalk and almost hit this guy, right? So it allows these guys to back off and not chase and hide in the wings, let them drive more normal. They think they're away. They get out of the car and boom, there's the police right there to take them into custody. So
a question popped into my mind earlier that the perfect time to ask it. Is there a way that you, with your aviation part of the state police, communicate all this success to the people above you so that they know that you're getting these great results? And so when it comes time to buy 3 new 206s, they go, heck yeah. Is there something that you have formally or informally that others could maybe get some ideas from to share that information?
Yeah, we do statistical tracking of everything we get with the aircraft, obviously, because a lot of things come down to stats, right? So we do statistical tracking, but more detailed than that, they have these event emails that get emailed to all the command personnel all the way up and down the chain for major events. So a lot of these carjacking pursuits or a car wanted for a shooting or multiple people with weapons taken into custody, they'll do a synopsis of it, the supervisors on scene, and they send it to an email address, and that email distributes it to all the command personnel. So they're always getting updates on what's going on around the state. So they see it and they see we're involved. So we just had like an award ceremony with a lot of command personnel, just getting different like certificates and things like that. And us pilots were invited to it because we had a couple things. But I laughed because I would say 90% of the incidents that were given awards to the ground personnel, right? They were giving it to the guys on the ground because without them, we're not getting this stuff either, right? Because we work together as a team. So they were well deserving of all those rewards we got. But a lot of that was assist by the aircraft getting on it and following it for them, right? They locate it first, they give it to us, we follow it for them, and then they do all the hard work after to process the arrest.
Right.
So
that's kind of one of the pitfalls of aviation. You never get the accolades and like, hey, good job, thank you for your help. But you do get the, hey, you lost that guy, thanks a lot. And like,
you
read the daily activity reports our department puts out, and you might, if you're lucky, you might have a supervisor write, the air unit assisted ground personnel in finding, such and such vehicle. Well, yeah, you don't realize what you're saying. That air unit's the one that found them and handed it off to the ground units. But yeah, you didn't get any mention at all. So it's it's just interesting. Not that we're in it for the accolades, but
we're not. And I get a lot of ball busting when we can't fly or I lose a car, or I didn't see this guy or whatever. But I know the guys appreciate us being up there and keeping an eye on them. And to me, it's more about our reputation amongst ourselves in law enforcement than it is about any kind of accolades or things that you put in the case. Like I've had different like awards and things like that in my career, and I'll tell you, most of them are in a drawer. Like the really good ones are in my display case in my living room. But I have a stack of different things and they're just sitting in a drawer. So not that I don't appreciate them. My agency, when they listen to this, I do appreciate being recognized. but I really appreciate when guys will send me a message on the side, say, without you tonight, we wouldn't have got that. I really appreciate the hard work because we're here for them, right? Like those are my guys and girls on the ground. I'm up here to make sure that they're safe and they get home without crashing their pursuit or getting hurt or anything like that. So it's more about them than it is any kind of accolades for us. So.
Right. That's worth much more than some medal that you pin on and have in a shadow box. And I've told people in the past, the greatest things that I did in my 31 years were not recognized. None of them.
Right.
Because, some of the canine stuff, because canine is kind of icky to some of the people up top. They don't like it because it's liability and stuff. Some of the greatest things that we did were completely looked over. And then when you do get recognized for something, you go, are you kidding me? They're going to recognize me for that?
Yeah.
And you just kind of laugh about it. But I agree. It's much better to get a text from some street coppers and go, man, thank you so much. Mm-hmm. If you didn't find him with the FLIR, or if you didn't find him with your dog, we would have never found him. Thanks so much. And you go, well, that's all I need, man. Push you to the next one.
Yeah. The lack of accolades is the only way I can think to say it. Underscores the importance of keeping track of stats, like we talked about, because you have to be able to go to your command staff and prove your worth, and show the value of the program when it comes to the crime fighting side of things. In addition to the other things you do, whether you're providing economic development with the resources, the other things that you're doing. I was in charge for a while of doing our weekly activity report, and then we had a monthly activity report. And I know what we do, but I'm not there 24 hours a day. So I don't know what some of the other crews are doing sometimes. I remember writing the weekly activity report and be like, holy cow, we're doing some really, really cool stuff. And I didn't even know about it. And it's within my own unit. So, it's wild. So anyways, if folks need help developing a stat keeping program, reach out to us. We'll put you in touch with people that have really, really professional programs. The downside of not doing a stat program or keeping stats is the fact that you can lose your program. There's programs that have closed down because they couldn't go to City Hall and prove the value of their program. So it's imperative that you guys keep track of all your stats, and there's a huge number of stats that are kept. So yeah, reach out to us and we'll help you develop or point in the direction of someone who can give you a good stat keeping program. Jack, you guys kept track of everything. In fact, I think my agency, we monitored or we mirrored our stat keeping program off of what you guys did. You talk about some of the stats you kept and how you track that. This is the end of part 2 of our conversation with Matt Szluka. Be sure to join us for part 3, where we continue our conversation on the importance of stat keeping. We also continue to profile Matt's career in his aviation unit at the Illinois State Police. Stay tuned after a word from our sponsors for some insights on upcoming episodes from the Hangar Z Podcast and the other Vertical Helicast podcast.
Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned air medical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 140-plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completions Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs, including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors. Thank you to our sponsor, Shotover. Shotover Systems is the leading developer and manufacturer of high-performance gyro-stabilized cameras with advanced real-time AR mapping and mission management, all backed by unparalleled custom training and support. Now offering the M2 multi-sensor system, Sol 6-axis EO/IR platform with 4K Ultra HD color and infrared technology. Ideal for law enforcement and defense. Offered with real-time AR overlays to quickly identify streets, weather, and traffic. Automated license plate recognition, 24-megapixel digital photographs, and automated steering and tracking. Thank you to our sponsor, CNC Technologies. CNC Technologies, serving law enforcement, government, and military markets with tailored mission solutions, system training, and live 24/7 support with CNC.live platform. Explore more at cnctechnologies.com.
Hey, thanks for sticking around to hear from our sponsors. Without their support, these conversations would not be possible. After this series with Matt from the Illinois State Police, we sit down for a conversation with Mike Calhoun and Matt Zdunich from the conference floor of the ECHO Public Safety Aviation Conference in San Diego to talk about the critically important topic of preparing and training our current TFOs to train new TFOs. Mike and Matt are undoubtedly the experts when it comes to the ideology and methodology behind training new tactical flight officers. This is definitely a conversation you don't want to miss. Be sure to tune into the Helicopter Podcast for the recently released episode 52, where Halsey talks with his guest about an industry-changing topic on autonomous helicopter flight and how it will potentially revolutionize the helicopter industry across various missions, from agriculture operations to firefighting. Join Quinny from the Real Rescue Podcast for his recently released episode with retired Coast Guard captain and award-winning author Martha LaGuardia-Kotite. For more information on those episodes, go to verticalhelicast.com. Cheers.
Time to close up the hangar. Thanks for joining us on the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts.